Hi, and welcome to this new video about semantic kernel, in which I want to give you the idea of how much is important good error handling and messages inside your plugins. So in this situation, everything is the same, okay? But this time, what I have is a difference in the question. I want to transcript audio. So I do not want only to extract audio, but I want also to extract the audio. And I have a dedicated plugin for this, but it has a bug. Sometimes it does not work, and in the situation it's not configured. So what does happen? If I'm going to run all example, and let's see of what is happening, you see the large language model first asking you to call plugin with video file and run ffmpeg. Now, after the WAV file is extracted, it is trying to transcript audio file. And as you can see, it is trying a couple of times, okay? It is trying a couple of times of extracting with a Python script. And I will explain to you how this works in the future video. But there's an error. So after calling a couple of times this, it appears that there's a persistence issue. And okay, so it is giving you a really generic way to answer the problem. And if I'm gonna dump everything, okay, so I can really understand what's going on, I can open in a text editor. And as you can see, that's the first message. And it asks the answer of the large language model is, please call you extract audio. And then extract audio works. So in my second request, I say, okay, I've extracted the audio. Now what I need to do. And the second answer is, okay, now you need to call the transcript timeline, because I've told the large language model that I've also a transcript timeline plugin, but this plugin has a problem. So as you can see in the third request, I see, okay, I ask for a thing. You told me that I need to extract audio. Then the audio was extracted. As you can see, the chat proceed and they say, you told me to call the transcript timeline. I call the transcript timeline, but the error, exception while invoking function object reference not set to an instance of an object. So that's the classic null reference error. So I'm telling to the large language model that invoking the transcript timeline, as it told me, gives an error. So the response is content. It seems there was an error trying to transcribe the audio. Let's try again. So the large language model has some sort of training. So it has an object, an object reference not set to an instance of an object. So as you can see, this answer is really different. It's the finish reason is the tool calls, but this time I have also a content. So the large language model does not tell me only to call a tool, calling again the transcript timeline, but it also has a content that is explaining me that the new call for transcript timeline, it is needed because the first one had a problem, but I still have the bug. So the call goes on, there's exception, and as the content as the tool call, I have again the exception. And now the answer of the large language model, it's, okay, it appears that there's persistence issue, blah, 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 and it's everything you see before. So as you can see, if your plugin has a generic error, the large language model still is trained on a vast amount of text. So probably the object reference not set to an instance of an object was seen as a general error. So it answers you to retry another time. So maybe the error is transient. So you see the agent, the large language model, GPT-4o, has some sort of reasoning in which, okay, I told you to call the plugin has an error, so I can let you try again to call. And if you have the same error again, I give up and I give you a very generic description. If you look at the plugin and I explain how this works in a future video, actually it needed for transcript timeline, it used Python wrapper, okay? It uses a Python wrapper that is a special class I wrote to let C# code invoke Python function. And it locates a script, and the script is a script that contains code to use OpenAI Whisper, and then I use my Python wrapper. In this situation, what's happening is the Python wrapper is injected by it is null, okay? And so the problem is I forget to configure the Python wrapper. So the Python wrapper is null. And the problem is I got a null reference exception. In this situation, probably you need to give to the large language model a better error message to understand what's going on. As you can see, I've added a simple check. And so if the Python wrapper is null, I'm going to throw an exception. And in the exception, I'm trying to tell as many details as I can, such as Python wrapper is not present. You need to register inside the dependency injection mechanism. Okay. Now with this better error message, let's see what's happening if I'm going to use the assistance again. Okay, here is the output. It seems that was an issue with the transcription service. The Python wrapper is not present or not configured correctly. You might want to check the configuration or try using another transcription service. So now, since the dependency injection was wrong, but I've told as with an exception the real reason instead of throwing an just an object no reference exception, I have a better interaction because as you can see, I'm going to see all the requests. So I get the first and I have the request too. And when I have the second request and I got the transcription timeline, I'm going to the third request. And as you can remember from the previous example, in the third request, the large language model is going to tell you, hey, we got an error with the transcription timeline. Let's try again. Maybe it's transient. And in this situation, since the content is error while invoking function, Python wrapper is not present, we cannot transcript the timeline, blah, 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 blah. So I've actually gave in the chat the exception that the plugin returned. GPT tells me, hey, as a third answer, I'm not going to try again. It seems there was an issue and stop. So now I have a couple of advantages. First of all, I have one less call to the large language model because from the error message, GPT is able to understand that the plugin is not configured correctly, so it cannot go on. And the second advantage is the message returned to the user is not a generic message, but it's a message that has much more meaning because it is telling that the transcription, the Python wrapper is not present. So it is really better error message so the user can understand what is going on. Now I configure Python wrapper inside my dependency injection service, but it will be the program of the next video, how you can invoke Python. And so I'm configuring with the location in which I should have a valid Python executable with a specific virtual environment. Since I've not configured the Python correctly, the result is still good because my Python wrapper return meaningful error to the large language model. So when I invoke the assistant again, this time it tells me that Python 3 not found at. So the answer is, you told me that I should find this executable at this location, but I'm not able to find it. The Python wrapper has a specific check that tells, hey, you configured me in a wrong way. I have not the Python environment where you told me that the Python executable is. And so the assistant is capable of giving you a very good error, probably error solution. It seems there was an error with the description due to a missing Python 3 environment. This is likely a configuration on the server side. Ensure the Python 3 is installed and blah, blah, blah. So as you can see, returning, trying to identify everything that can go wrong inside your plugin, thoroughly checking all your input parameter and all your configuration and giving really good error, throwing exception with a meaningful error message helps the large language model understanding which is the best next step to perform to go on and answer the question of the user. So actually, the good rule of thumb is whenever you create a plugin in C# to be used with semantic kernel, always return meaningful error. Validate all the input parameter, check every prerequisite, check every parameter. So instead of returning a generic error, you are returning an error that tells the large language model which is the problem, like, hey, I've not the Python wrapper configured. A Python wrapper is configured, but I'm not finding the Python executable, and so on. This is because you are interacting not with a programmatic, not with a program in which you can simply say, I have an error. You are interacting with a large language model, and the chat is constructed starting with the question of the user and including all the answer of the tools. So if the answer of the tools answer a good error message, the large language model can understand which is the best action to perform next. As you can see, returning a generic null reference exception, in a certain way trick the large language model to say, hey, we have a generic, really generic exception. Retry calling the plugin again. So we are ending with a double call to the plugin, and the second call always fails because you have a wrong configuration. So instead, if you tell the large language model that you have a not valid configuration, you miss something, it immediately stops, telling that this kind of plugin cannot be called anymore because it will return an error. And also, it can analyze the error, the exception of the tool, and it can give to the user some solution like, hey, the error of the plugin is it misses the Python executable. So probably you need to install Python and configure Python. Probably there is a README and so on. And remember the example with the temperature we did in the previous video, where we insert fake check, where if the temperature of the GPU is too high, it will throw an error. And so we can ask to the large language model, hey, try to call the function each round with a lower temperature, with a lower power, so we can avoid hitting the too high temperature error. So it was a fake example, but it shows you that a good error message can indeed be used from the large language model to understand which is the best course of action to solve the user question. Maybe calling again with different parameter, or maybe calling again because the error is generic, object reference not test one instance of an object. So it worth retrying, or no, we immediately stop because there's an error in configuration and the error is not gonna solve itself by calling again the function. And this show you how important it is to construct your plugin with a thoroughly check of everything it's regarding configuration and everything regarding input parameter. Because the large language model understands that if there is a configuration error, it cannot proceed anymore. If there's an error in the parameter, or if the error is related to the parameter, it can maybe let the semantic kernel call again the plugin, maybe with different parameter, like in the temperature example. I hope this video helps you to understand how to write a better plugin for your semantic kernel. And I hope also you like this video. Bye bye. I'm waiting you for the next one.